Eva Porter.
Thank you, Dad. That's
Okay.
great. I feel honored that you took the time to read this book, and I wanted to tell the listeners that we have a special treat for you. If you bought this book, you are now going to be able to hear us talk about this memory of this story and what it means to matter. So what do you think about this story, Dad?
Well, that brings back the story that I remember very well, and my father. An interesting thing about it, I was living in Tijuana, Mexico, when I got a phone call from Columbus, Ohio, telling me that my father had died. And I was shocked. He was 75. And I was shocked. And so I left Tijuana immediately, headed for home, took a bus up, or I guess I drove up to whatever the town was just north of there in Southern California, and flew to Columbus. Before I left the office, the secretary said, "Oh, Mr. Perry, here's some mail for you." I put it in my pocket and didn't look at it until I got settled on the airplane, and I opened a letter in the airplane, and it was from my father. And he told me this story in the letter, which I got after he died in Columbus, Ohio. And that really made me cry, that I got that letter, him telling me that story on the airplane after he had died.
And it just goes to show you how important it is to communicate with each other and share these moments and remember these special times that you have with your parents or your grandparents.
Yes, to pass stories down from one generation to another, and to recall those stories 50, 65 years later and tell them again. Yes. But now I do remember every detail of that little trip down to Jonathan Creek to pick up those fish and throw them in the water.
And can you tell me, excuse me, I'm sorry, I had to let the dog out. I'll have to cut that part out. But so you grew up in Glenford, Ohio.
I was born in Glenford, yes. I lived there until I started the first grade when I moved to Zanesville, Ohio. I spent the first grade in Zanesville.
So Glenford has, it's in a glen, really. It's a valley almost, right?
That's right. It's in a very not mountainous, hilly county of the state of Ohio.
And that Jonathan Creek, does it flow into a river?
It probably does, but I could not tell you what river. It certainly is not the Ohio River.
So the flood, you were on higher ground at that time, and so your house didn't get flooded.
No, our house was up on top of a hill. Looking over the back of our house, you could see Jonathan Creek.
Oh, wow. Wow. And see, I got the idea for this story because you told me this story, you passed it down, and then I went on YouTube and I watched lots of people who lived in Cincinnati be interviewed. And I listened to their stories and I put it together and then I went and I did research and I found pictures of these floods. And I remember as a little girl in our house, we had newspaper clippings that Grandma Disher had saved of the Great Flood. Because it was so epic. It
Yes.
was amazing that, it never had happened before. And I don't think it's happened since.
Well, I think we have better flood control now than we did 80 years ago.
So they must have learned a lesson because of the levees were not strong enough at that time.
That's right.
And now they have more control over it.
Yes.
So what else do you remember about the way, did people have motorboats as much? Or do you think that, like in this story, we have a family rowing to the
Yeah, well, but back then in Glenford, Ohio, I doubt that one person had a motorboat. Everybody, if they had boats, they had boats that you rode with paddles.
Yeah, because motors were not, they would be really expensive or hard to come by.
Well, don't forget, this was right at the end of the Great Depression.
Wow. That must have
And
been so hard for people.
nobody had money then.
Yeah. Yeah. And
As a matter of fact, one of the last year that my father was superintendent of schools in Glenford, they didn't have enough money to pay him his salary. It wasn't a very
wow.
big salary, but they didn't have enough money. So that's why he left.
Wow.
Because where in a little country farm town at the end of the Great Depression does the government get money to pay teachers? Well, they get them from the farmers who own the land. And at that time, at the end of the Great Depression, farmers didn't have any money to pay their taxes. And so the taxes didn't go to pay the superintendent of schools.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was a different world.
Yeah. We're very fortunate now that we have flood control and we have a more connected society.
Yes.
In some ways. Yeah. But I think the thing about then that we still have now is mattering to each other. And
that's something that has gone on forever and will continue, I hope.
Yeah.
We hope that it continues, because that's what makes society a livable, loving place to live.
And I notice, the one thing I put in this book that I notice about you is when you take walks, you're always picking up trash. So, and it is like the same, that's why you do it, because you think it matters. It makes the
Yes.
parks look nice. And
one guy I used to go jogging with, and I won't mention his name, complained several times because I would stop while we were jogging and pick up the trash on the way to take it to a trash can.
Yeah.
And he didn't think that was very nice, but I did it.
But sometimes it's just like the picture in this book of the It Matters Emotatude is like a yellow hands with little eyes in them, and you look through them like in a heart. And the idea is things will matter to you if you observe them. If you look around you and you look at the inside importance of every living thing, you can see it. You just have to look.
It's much more important than the Monopoly game or the other toys that you play.
Yeah.
That you play with.
The people and the beings that are alive, and
the loving of one another is what counts.
Yeah. So this is going to be a great audible recording. I hope that people who are listening to this book will buy more Emotatude books. You can find all of the Emotatude books on Amazon. And they are I'm going to try to have all of them in Audible as well.
Oh, good.
And wonderful. I want to, before we leave, I want to introduce the narrator. So the narrator is the inspiration to the story, and it's Robert Joseph Perry, my dad.
And the guy that was paddling the boat to take us down there was Elmer L. Perry.
Yes, and I will change in the last part. I will change that spelling, Dad.
Yeah. Well, he's had difficulty with Elmer or Elmore he did all his life.
Back then, people spelled things creatively more.
Yes, right. But they still loved one another very much. Yes.
Yeah, and it's really, that's not what matters. What matters is how much you matter to each other. And
Yes.
Dad, you matter a lot to me.
Well, I hope so. And you matter tremendously to me.